Try. Is this working? Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Indeed, the plan has changed, of course, because we adapted to the situation. So originally, we were meant to have a side event to what is happening right now called Assemblies of Solidarity. And so it was meant to be a moment focusing on LGBTI rights and the mental health in the community. And the event was meant to take place in Polish and targeting mainly Polish activists and Polish organizations. As we saw with Marta, for instance, right before, those people are very, very busy at the moment. They are all hands on deck because they are actually on the front line of supporting the refugees. And so, of course, they have an emergency state that is taking them. So, that being said, we still felt like something should be done and that those people should be, their work should be highlighted in another form. So the first thing is that when it comes to the mental health in the LGBTI community, of course, I want to remind you of the little speech we had this morning of Dominic, who spoke from his perspective, the youth perspective mostly. And I just want to remind of this little piece of information that he gave that is quite frightening and that we should keep in mind, which is that the second cause of death amongst young queers in Poland is suicide. So I know this is not very good news, but we need to keep it in mind. And when we talk about mental health in the queer community, it's not just nice words, it's not good sentiment, it's a reality, and it's actually taking lives. So, adapting to the situation, Virginia and I have been working with a local facilitator called Antonina Lewandowska. She can't be with us right now because she's helping a Ukrainian family, but she worked with us to identify and to reach out to those local activists and organizations working on sexual reproductive health and rights and LGBTI rights. I went with her to the station, to Central Station, right before. We spent a few hours there, and we talked with the volunteers who work at the station right now. This is by no means exhaustive, but I just want to give you a little recap of what is happening there. So first, the groups that we identified who are actually there on the ground, the first one is the Scouts. So you have non-religious Scouts and Catholic Scouts. In this case, it was mostly the non-Catholics that were present. And so they are organized. They wear yellow life vests, and they go around the station helping Ukrainian refugees. Some speak Russian because sometimes Poles have learned Russian in school. They speak English, but mostly, yeah, that's like Russian or Polish. There is a lack of Ukrainian language, although Russian and Ukrainian is pretty close. So the thing is that those scouts were appointed there by the region, so not by the city of Warsaw itself, but like the biggest region. The authorities of the region have decided to completely delegate this work to the volunteers of the scouts because they are not doing the work themselves. And so what we heard from those volunteers is that they really feel like the region completely abandoned the sheep and they're letting them do the work. The other group that we saw there was the fire brigade. There's quite a big presence of fire brigade, so firefighters. They are independent in the sense that they are not appointed or they are not under the legal obligation of responding to the municipality or the region. So they came because they wanted to, basically. So this is in no way a governmental decision. And then you have private companies, especially phone companies, that are offering free SIM cards, which might seem like a detail, but it's actually very important for refugees who are mostly women and children, and so for whom it is crucial that they remain in contact with their families at home. This is one of the police recommendations that we got also from the police officer who we spoke with. It's a recommendation that is done in order to avoid cases of violence and human trafficking. They are encouraged to always keep contact with their families, even if the families are still back in Ukraine, so that someone knows where they are at all times whenever they move from one place to the next. So another thing, so there are some people sleeping in the station, although this is by far not the majority. The reason why is because some families are lacking information, and so they fear that they will lose the next train or the next bus departing for another destination because they don't really understand what is happening. So they prefer sleeping in the station, although there is no way to shower, there is no proper food, no proper like conditions to live, but this is again like a lack of information and organization. So you have families and like women and children sleeping in the station just out of fear of not getting the opportunity of getting a bus or a train to go somewhere else. Then an important thing, we saw that there is a non-Ukrainians corner for those seeking refuge that are not from Ukraine. When we spoke with them, it was quite alarming to see that there's a very tiny concrete example. As we've all heard, in most EU countries now, Ukrainian refugees get free access to trains, to railway and public transport. At least in Poland, it's the case. They have free access to trains and public transport. Non-Ukrainian refugees do not get any of this. So that's like a clear upfront example of a double standard and of a difference of treatments from the Polish government, who is clearly not treating all refugees the same way, depending on where they come from or their skin color. Yeah, so all in all, whatever is happening at the station right now is all relying on the volunteers' shoulders. The region has left the volunteering organization in the hands of the Scouts. And we see already some political manipulations. For instance, the head of the Center for Ukrainian Refugees was replaced yesterday as a result of political manipulation, although there was no need to replace her. So that's another tiny example. So that is the state of what I witnessed in the station. Maybe some of you also have other experiences, and I would be happy to hear them, of course. So now I want to go towards the list of the emergency needs and the points that the LGBTQI community and the women's rights movements have identified as main priorities. And that's also why I think it's important to give you those concrete examples of those current needs, to remember that this is also, like those needs that I'm going to tell you right now are actually also needs that exist usually when they're in times of peace or so-called peace, but they're just increased in times of war. So first one is the difficulty to access emergency contraception. It is very expensive and only available when it's prescribed by a medical professional. For people arriving from a war zone or from also another country than Ukraine, of course you arrive in a country where you do not know anyone, or almost, and you certainly do not have an appointed doctor. So the access to the morning after pill is completely out of reach. And same goes for the prescriptions of contraceptives. There is already been identified cases of sexual harassment and rape on women who are on the road of seeking refuge. There's been reported cases of rapes on the trains, for instance, coming from the border to Warsaw. Then it is also very difficult to get access to abortion, for almost impossible, basically, for those women. Women who get pregnant as a result of rape in the war zone are just unable to get access to abortion. So basically they are forced to seek abortion abroad. So that means that it's an, of course, added stress on the mental health. Because that means that they also have the clock ticking, because they need to reach out to a country that allows for abortion before the final deadline, knowing that the final deadline for abortion varies from one country to the next. then we've heard also from Marta before, we have founded cases of human trafficking. So women are getting kidnapped and hunted at the border. Some NGOs are working on the ground about that, but basically the biggest recommendation for women fleeing at the moment is to not leave alone. If they live with children or by themselves, the recommendation is to stay with a group, although it may seem like it's making progress slower, but it is safer. So that was mostly for women's rights. I'm sorry, I'm not bringing very good news. So from the more queer perspective, one of the main problems right now is for transgender women, because as far as we know, they are not forced to join the military in Ukraine, but also they are being stopped at the border. Because their physical appearance do not match the gender on their identification documents. They are not being able to leave Ukraine because officially people who have male documents are not allowed to leave the country if they're aged between 18 to 60. And then sometimes, even if they manage to go out of Ukraine, then the Polish border stops them because of this difference between their appearance and the gender on their documents. So they are being detained at the border. For those who manage to escape anyway and to flee, they have a very difficulty to access hormonal treatments, like we said before. Some queer refugees are being detained at the border. And those who try to apply for asylum on the basis of being persecuted because of an LGBTI reason in their home country are being kept in guarded facilities. Those facilities also are deemed to not fulfill basic human rights standards, which was identified by the Ombudsman. And then finally, it's also linked to healthcare. It is very difficult to access HIV treatments for any gender, of course. The med supplies are slowly running out, and the treatments are very expensive, also in the West, without a prescription. A box, for instance, is like up to 1,000 euros. So even the Westerners who want to send over medical help, like they can't afford this kind of med. So this is a very big problem because, of course, once the meds are running out, as you know, it is a life-threatening disease, and so there's not much that can be done at this point. So that was a list of concrete examples of what is happening. This is, again, not exhaustive at all. I'm sure there's more that we can add to this, but I tried my best. And this is just concrete examples to remind everyone that there is an emergency, and so that's a difficulty that we had when we reached out to activists for this session that we were meant to have on LGBTI rights. We were like, well, why are they not seeing the need for this more long-term vision? And that's why I'm here actually today. To be honest, so I live in Brussels. I question the importance and the relevancy of me coming here today, considering the situation. And then I realized that I'm going to do what I think I can do best, which is trying to be that bridge. Trying to be that bridge between the local activists and the European level organizations. And I'm trying to do that today because I do believe in the more long-term vision that Eumans is bringing of fighting for our political rights as citizens, as residents of Europe, and for supporting, of course, those who don't have the same chance. Let's say it's crazy, but we call it a chance now to have our basic human rights fulfilled. So I do believe in this long-term vision. I do understand also the reason why we got all these messages back from those activists being like, listen, okay, it's great, good work, have a good time, but we don't have the capacity right now. They responded like, we don't have 5 minutes to give you. On the phone or even meeting them here in real life in Warsaw. And so I really hope to try and bring that bridge between those local activists who are completely overwhelmed at the moment and who are focusing on this emergency state, although it's not necessarily their prime activity of work, actually, usually, and this longer-term vision that is needed, and we need to actually also care about it now before the Polish government also takes advantage of it, which they are already kind of starting to do. Just yesterday, it was not passed, but the Warsaw community, the Warsaw Municipality Council tried to implement a new directive allowing basically social servants for financial mistakes, and that it wouldn't need to be repaired as such or wouldn't need to be followed as such, which goes completely against the anti-corruption laws that Poland once fought for. So there is a lot to be done, and I hope this serves as inspiration. Thank you.